Right, we're going to. Yeah, welcome along to the first Whiskey Circus of the year. Really pleased to have 3 times on now. So Andy Watts from South Africa decided to come along and talk about the brand new Three Ships, which is a European exclusive. At last getting some into the country. We've also got Mr. Isla himself. Is it Bunnahabhain you work for, David, or was it one of the Diageo ones? I haven't really understood it yet.
Well, I do work at Bunnahabhain just now, Storm, but yeah, obviously I've got great ambitions to never set foot in a Diageo distillery.
I was going to say, what's that one day when you grow up you want to work for Bunnahabhain? But right, anyway, we'll come to you in a bit, David. But I want to sort of jump straight into Andy and have a chat about some whiskey that's pretty prevalent in this group, anyway, and talk about the brand new release of some Three Ships finally into Europe and especially into the UK. So, if you want to give us a little quick introduction again, Andy, and talk about your whiskey, we'll get this big ugly mug of Paul's off the main picture that I've got.
Yeah, well, firstly, Happy New Year to everybody out there. And Soren, thanks for inviting me. Always nice to see you chaps and ladies. And yeah, pity Sophie's not on today. I wanted to congratulate her personally on a WSET level 3 with flying colours. So that's fantastic news. So,
yeah, I'm sure she'll see this and she's probably still hungover from the celebrations.
Yeah, well, yeah. But anyway, well done, Sophie. Yeah. And so, yeah, well, Soren, I think this is a little bit of a double whammy, this 12-year-old, because it's something which I'm super excited about, but yet I've taken such a lot of flack from it in South Africa. So it's really like between a rock and a hard place. It's something I've always wanted to do. And when we first did the boutique launch, we had a marketing lady called Liesel Dippenaar. Small little lady, but an absolute gem of a lady, a pocket rocket. She gets anything done and she gets it done quickly. And then she left us. She went to join Inverroche Gin. And she wasn't enjoying it there, and there was an opportunity for her to get back into the company. But it's actually on our export marketing side and predominantly on wine into the Nordics and that area. But we've always had a good relationship. And she said, well, let me try and, see what I can do. And she kind of spoke to the people on the international side, Gary Greenfield, and then the UK team. And she just came to me one day. She says, okay, what can I give her and how much? So I kind of looked through the stock I had and I said, well, listen, I've got this little 12-year-old, which nobody's laid claim to. What about that? And, within 3 months, where normally it takes us 3 years to get a project off the ground, within 3 months, she'd actually turned this whole thing around. And we were into production for this first run. And we were pretty conservative with the first one because we really didn't know what to expect. But, the UK team under Paul and Derek, who was in charge of the logistics, poor guy, I think I could have swam to UK quicker than that shipment got there. I mean, we really thought it had been hijacked all over the place. It took about 4 weeks, I think, where it should normally take 2. But yeah, it got there, and lots of thanks to you guys on that side as well, Brian especially. Been putting a lot of pressure through social media, and it does work if it's done in the correct way. It's like the water drop on your forehead. Eventually, you want to get rid of it. So the easiest thing to do is just do what they want and get it out there. So a combination of having Liesel come back into the Distell team, not specifically on whiskey, but the fact that she's got a passion for it helped, and then being able to talk the guys around, and then also having a bit of pressure from UK. We got a certain amount in there, and it's been such a, well, I won't say such a success because it was a small amount, but because it's actually sold out in terms of us into the market, We're already planning a second bottling run for as soon as we open up the doors tomorrow. So hopefully by the end of the month, we've got some more in bottle, which can then get across and fulfill actually the European and Baltics part of the deal, because at the moment everything we produced didn't leave the UK. It stuck in, it got sold in the UK. So yeah, that's the background to it, Soren.
And what amount of bottles did you do on the first run then? Was it? I mean, you say limited, so was it a small limit or?
Well, I don't know what you guys call small. You know, I mean, I see often you come up with Bimber bottlings, and you know, you're involved with the English Whiskey Co. And you know, I don't know what small is for you guys, but for us it was a 5,000 litre bottling.
Yeah.
This particular one. So
yes, I mean, yes, I mean
that's very small.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we have some companies that like to put out a limited edition of 62,000. So, you know, anything to me around that sort of 2, 3, 4,000 is certainly very small. You know, and yeah, 5,000 is it's not a massive amount, but it's good to hear that, you know, yourselves have sold out of that. It shows the, you know, the demand is there then.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, you know, obviously, if it hadn't sold out, you know, you could have sat with a bit of a problem, but I think that's why we went relatively small with the first step. It isn't a limited edition. You know, let's get that clear. If the market grows, I can grow with it. I have got, you know, the distillery is quite big in terms of stock, so you know, we don't have a shortage of aged stock. You know, I'm getting nailed for that now too. But in my early years, you know, I kind of had a free reign before we became a part of this, you know, almost corporate kind of regime. And I just used to lay down stock on my belief of what I thought the market would look like. Now you've got accountants who determine those figures, and all of a sudden they want to know why I laid down so much stock. You know, so the question is, why haven't you sold it? You know, so it's a catch-22 there as well. But you know, going forward, whether it be me or whoever replaces me when I get to retirement, they're not going to have that. You know, unless it's been planned, it's not going to be made, and it's going to make it more difficult to seize opportunities like this one, which arose. And this is the fun part of the business to me. It's not, you know, doing the core stuff every day that keeps the distillery ticking, but it's these, you know, when you can respond to consumer demand, when you can do something different, when you know, you can innovate, you can see, you can interact. That's kind of what keeps getting me out of bed in the morning.
So if you do put some more over, then are you looking to make it sort of like a follow-on, so it'll be bourbon cask again, or could we see something a little bit different maybe next time?
Well, I think in terms of the 12-year-old, I'll try to stick to this, but you know, the plan is Liesel's already thinking about what next, and I was kind of pulling her in. I was saying, hey, Liesel, let's see if this is let's see if this one works first. But I think now, you know, with what she's seen, she's already looking at, you know, what can be the next offering which we send across. So, you know, I'm in the background on things like that. But as soon as you start going to, you know, the cask finishes or selected casks, sherry casks, then the volumes become even less.
Yeah.
And you know, then you know, if we come across, I'd like to think that we can satisfy the market in the beginning until we know we've got a kind of a following there, and then I can start to look doing maybe some special things on that side.
And so with that, then obviously we know how well that's gone down, and we know how well the entry Baines has gone. When can we see a more aged Baines? Maybe, you know, is that a possibility now?
Well, Baines actually went quiet for a while, Soren. I'll tell you when Baines really started picking up again. It was, believe it or not, with this kind of lockdown period, and you know, the kind of innovation of these virtual sessions where people like yourselves, you know, when we had a Baines session, all of a sudden you see a peak in the sales, and with that you get somebody writes a review on it, and then it gets followed and somebody buys it, and so we've seen a little bit of growth in Baines over the last year in the UK, where before that it had been stagnant. Yes, we've always had guys like Dave's wife who loves it. You know, we've had those regular comebacks, but you know, you need to see growth before our marketing department will do something else. I've got the stock, so it's not a case of not having the stock. It's a case of when is the time right.
Yeah.
You know, I've done 2 sessions this week with our sales team in the Baltics and Latvia, and you know, strange enough, they only started selling this product in March. In fact, I was across in February. That was my last visit, and I met Mikael Kubzans in Scotland that time I was up there, and he was telling me how he was going to give his all for Baines. And in the space of this last 9 months, the Eastern European countries have now become Baines' second largest market.
Yeah.
So all of that is encouraging, and you know, the more we sell, then the more. I mean, the people in South Africa are also saying, when we're going to get another one. You know, they're tired. It's been 10 years now. But yeah, well, as I say, I've got the liquid. We're ready to, you know, we've done a few offerings for duty free, just to show what we can do. And you know, I'd love to bring an 8, a 10, a 12, a 15-year-old into normal general retail sale. I'd love to do that.
And so when you say you've got the liquid then for both Three Ships and for Baines, if you do start releasing on a more regular basis into the European market, obviously into your South African market and get into, say, America and China, have you got enough liquid then to sustain all that, or will it be quite a limited amount of releases each year?
No, I think, you know, at this stage, sort of when, you know, if you see sales growing or if you see markets coming online, then, you know, you start adjusting production to make sure that you've got that kind of stock going ahead. I mean, we have plenty of stock at the moment. You know, America was very big on our radar 3-4 years ago, and then we had a company reshuffle, and we closed down our American arm, of which I'd worked very closely with, and we got really good growth going in America, and we moved it across to a distribution company with no marketing backup money-wise. And you slip to the bottom of the pile, and all of a sudden you lose that tracking in the States. So, you know, I've got all that stock which was planned for America, which is now, you know, able to go into other markets. So no, I wouldn't worry about that. We've got a pretty good system in terms of getting stock online. Yeah.
And so over the last year then, well, I mean, I know in South Africa you've been hit with lockdowns a hell of a lot harder than we have. I'm assuming you haven't been producing neither within that time.
In the times of lockdown, we're not allowed to produce. Yeah. Like now, we're in a lockdown again. All we're allowed to produce is alcohol for sanitizer.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to move alcohol. We're not allowed to, you know, move it from a distillery to a warehouse. It's a total lockdown on alcohol, which is it's hit us badly. It's yeah, we were just showing signs of recovery when, you know, they came with this new lockdown just before Christmas. So, you know, this is in place till the 15th of January, and we're hoping then that, you know, there will be some sort of relief, because, you know, there's a lot of people in that industry in this country, including, you know, the industries coupled to it, like tourism, hospitality. And these guys are, you know, they aren't corporate. A lot of them are small guys, small wine estates, and they're taking it, you know, they're taking knock after knock after knock, and it's just putting more and more people out of work, which is, to be perfectly honest, at the end of the run, I think going to be a bigger issue for us than what COVID has been.
Yeah, and so on a normal year then, what would your capacity production be, and what did you actually manage last year?
Well, we remember as well, Soren, we don't just produce for Baines. We've got Three Ships, which is a massive brand in South Africa. We've got 2 other whiskies called Harrier and Knights. Harrier also a very, very big brand in South Africa. So the distillery is capable of producing 7 million liters of grain alcohol a year. The malt side, 2 million. And we've got capacity for 150,000 casks. At the moment, we're probably running on maybe about 60 to 65% of capacity. So, you know, 4.5 million liters of alcohol a year. You know, to go into what's in the 5-year plan. That's, so in other words, what we're producing today is for at least 3 years, 4 years, 5 years in advance.
And so with the lockdown, then I'm assuming you weren't bottling or anything. So last year's stock, even though it was lowering what you produced, you obviously weren't bottling it neither then.
Yeah, well, it didn't go anywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
a distillery, doesn't matter who they are, you know, whether it's us or Bunner or any of them. I mean, you carry what we call strategic stock. And that's not necessarily for COVID or a lockdown. It's mainly if you drop a plate in your still or a boiler blows up or something like that, and you're out of production for 3-4 months due to technical reasons. And then you've got a buffer stock. You know, we run on about 5 to 6 months of buffer stock because that's how long it would take to put a new boiler in if we lost the boiler. So, you know, that is now this year our technical problem has actually been COVID. So, you know, we did have the strategic stock that's ran a bit low or lower. And as soon as we're in, production again, we'll ramp it up to where it needs to be.
Yeah. And so with the stocks then that you put into coming over to Europe, like we've said, it was all bourbon casks. What was that always intentional for it to be just purely bourbon cask then? I know you've sort of said, obviously, if you put others in, it might reduce the amount that was available. But, you know, was it intentional to be bourbon, or was it just that's the way it came out?
No, it was intentional to be bourbon. My thoughts on, let's say, the core range of single malts was always to be in bourbon cask. I only started my first sherry, let's say, innovation in 2014. That's when I brought in my first sherry casks. So, it's since then it's been, 1 or 2 containers a year. So that's not going to, it's not going to bring you a core brand, which is a sherry cask finish, for example. So those would be one-off, like our Masters collection in the Three Ships. And maybe, maybe I can put in a 5 or a 10% sherry just to give a little twist on a single malt. But the idea with our malts is it's got a core DNA. It's, quite a unique, smoky peatiness to it. We do get our barley from the UK, as you know. And, there's only a couple of ways you can really affect the style of your spirit. And if it's malt, then obviously is the barley peated or unpeated? If it's peated, to what level? And then the type of wood you mature it in. Further, it's just like Scotland. It's totally natural process, water, grain, yeast. So, my thought has always been, and when I started it with our single malts on this side, was to let the malt's character come through and not influence too much with the wood. And the first one I did with older American oak. And even though it was well received, I had to kind of bite my tongue when I talked about it because I wasn't crazy. It was too one-dimensional to me. And so what I've done since then is I've added, a better variation in American oak. In other words, not all 4th and 5th fill, but, a larger percentage of first fill, second fill going in there as well. And that's, I think, where, this 12-year out stands out a little bit above our 10-year-old in South Africa, because this one had a little bit more younger wood in it, which just gives a little bit more, to talk about in the dram.
Yeah. And what were the ppm levels in the 12?
Well, it would have been the same as it was in the 10. It starts off at around about 30 to 32 parts per million, which is the old Bowmore standard. As we all know, it's pretty well documented that most of what I did is through, my emotional events, which I had there on that beautiful island, which Davy calls home. So yeah, it starts 32. I would guess probably between 8 and 10 in the bottle.
And could we see some unpeated come over, or?
It's a possibility, but at this stage it's still pretty young.
Yeah.
What I've done is some of the malt I use in the Three Ships Select, I started revatting that, because not everybody, I mean, I kind of like smoky peaty whiskeys, so I've been pretty selfish in my career, and what I've produced is basically been what I like. Where now I'm taking a little bit more, of what the consumer is looking for in mind, and seeing how I can change things to, to satisfy a wider crowd and not just myself.
Yeah. I think Vim's got a question for you. Do you want to ask away, Vim? Is he there?
I can see Vim.
Yeah. Is he listening?
I think he's saying he's got no microphone.
Oh, sorry, he's got no microphone. Right, then. So Vim's asked, which I think you've already sort of quickly touched on, but is there any plans for Pacific finishes or higher PPMs?
I've done a couple of years ago. We did a very high PPM batch, but you know, I had to be kind of sneaky there, because if there is no plan for the liquid, in other words, if there's no business plan for it, I'm not supposed to make it.
Mm.
That's how accountants run businesses now. So unless there's an end goal, then really your hands are tied, and that's very difficult, because we change marketers like we change our freaking underwear. So and every one of them is then changing a label and changing a bottle design instead of worrying about what's happening with the liquid. So it makes it difficult to really be as innovative as what I used to be. But I have done a heavily batch, and we'll see how that turns out in a few years. Even though we've got the accelerated maturation here because of our temperature, I still believe that it's the youngest I would like to see our stuff coming out is 6 years.
Yeah.
And we've seen that works. We've seen it with the boutique. We've seen it with a private barrel on this side. Last year's Whiskey Brother exclusive, the collaboration with Whiskey Brother Mark and his shop in Joburg, that was a 7-year-old. So we've seen that at that age there's enough in the product to release it. It's not young and raw. There's definitely a roundness, a maturity, a smoothness which you would expect of something a little bit older than that.
And so what age do you sort of foresee your liquid aging to before it starts getting a little bit too oaky, and that, obviously with the faster maturation?
Yeah, well, what I do is I've got plans to take up to up to 30 years old, Soren, where I just have to keep revatting. I can't leave it in that wood. So I've found here that between probably 8 and 10 years, then you start to see a particular cask getting tired. So then I'll revat that across into some younger wood under customer's excise supervision, or a different type of wood, just to get some more years on. I mean, it's no secret, next year Christmas we're looking to release a 21-year-old Three Ships here into the South African market. I am trying to twist their arms to let a few bottles come across to the UK, seeing as though you're officially on the map. But that's, at this stage, that isn't guaranteed, but it's something I will fight for. And that's a liquid I've been showing at whiskey festivals for the last 4 years as the under-the-counter dram. So, most of the people over here kind of know it's coming, and they've been following the progression of this malt too. So yeah, I can get them older, but I've just got to revat and watch them more carefully than in the colder climates.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of questions coming in. So I'll go to Andy first. Andy Maltbox, yeah. So Andy 2 or 3.5, whichever it was. And then when Andy's gone, Ed will bring one in.
Well, funnily enough, mine kind of ties in with Ed's, but I don't want to steal his thunder as such. But given that, I don't want to sort of like keep on the same subject, Andy, but given where you guys are and your connection with particularly South African wine, Stellenbosch, you've got a huge wine industry over there, and some of it's absolutely fantastic. I think Ed's pretty much asked it as well, to be fair, in the chat. But what I was going to ask was, is there any plans, or do you actually have any sort of like South African wine casks over there that you intend to use, or do you have any sort of like deals with any of the wineries within the group or out of the group for releases, finishes and things? Because I mean, personally, I'm a massive fan of Meerlus, so if you can get hold of a Meerlus cask, I will buy that cask from you. Just saying.
I'll just add to that, Andy, if you don't mind. I was going to ask a similar question to Andy, but just about collaboration between the wineries in the Distell portfolio, but more specifically just on European oak itself, and have you kind of utilised the kind of wine casks, and whether you've actually done any sort of rinsing or steaming to just get that European oak profile rather than sort of an ex-wine cask maturation.
Okay, I'll try and answer them both at the same time, because I know where you're coming from. Yeah, we're fortunate in Distell that we do have quite a few wine estates. They're getting less and less. We've just sold off another one now, Plaisir de Merle. We've got what they call the Three Ships Masters Collection, which is an annual limited release. We did the 5th one this year. The second one in 2016, that was a 15-year-old Three Ships blend finished in pinotage casks, which is a South African red wine varietal. This year, the 5th in the Masters Collection was an 11-year-old single malt Shiraz cask finish. So that's out there. Also, we should have had it in duty free now, with the airports being closed. There's a Baines Shiraz cask finish coming into duty free as well. I've also got other wine casks laid down. So yeah, we've touched on it. I like it. I think our whiskies work really well with them. The strange thing is, and you might not, or you might know it, but wineries don't use too many casks anymore. Casks are becoming very, very expensive, so they use alternative wood, be it chips or staves or other things, which we can't use in whiskey. So, especially our wineries now, for the big volume wines, there's very few casks, wine which goes into cask. For some of your private bins, etc., yes, but then that might give me 10 or 15 casks a year, which isn't a lot. And with your, going about steaming them, Edward, what I normally do with them is some I rinse, some I leave unrinsed, depending on how long I think I'm going to leave the product in there. For example, if I take a fresh red wine cask, then seriously within, if I put my grain in there, within 6 months I can have a serious finish on that if it's an unrinsed cask. If it's a rinsed cask, then I can leave it in there for 3-4 years and not even worry about it. So that's how I am. I don't steam them. I just either rinse them out quickly or just leave them as is.
Thanks, Andy.
Got it. Yep, both of you. Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing there is, Andy, if you were to go to that finishing product where you're talking about the Baines having some wine casks and that, would we see that in the 3-year-old as a finish then, or would that be a totally different product?
Well, Baines is on average a 5-year product. Remember, it's
yeah. I'm sorry, I meant as in the double 3-year-old. Yeah. Yeah,
twice matured, two sets of casks. If it would be something older than that, I wouldn't bring a normal Baines onto the market with a finish. The one going into duty free is a 10-year-old Baines, which has spent time in Shiraz casks.
Yeah.
So it would be older variants if I did that. What we've got now with the normal Baines, that will be the base of every Baines innovation going forward. So
right, yeah.
all of what's in duty free, be it the 18-year-olds, the 15-year-old, all started their life as the normal Baines.
Yeah.
And then from there, instead of going into the bottle after that second vatting, it then goes to a different cask. Like with the 15-year-old, it was just 10 years in older American oak. For the 18, it was a 15-year-old, which was then went into 3 different sherry casks for 3 years each, Oloroso Fino and Pedro Jimenez. And the Shiraz was, don't want to get this wrong, I think it was 8-2. I think it was 8 years and a 5 normal oak and then 2 years. I just have to check on that one. We've actually done so many finishes this last year since, or so many releases projects since the last lockdown finished, that I was getting really confused with what was what and going where.
Yeah, and I mean, Brian's just chucked in the same question as I was going to ask, but I'll let Brian ask it anyway. So do you want to fire away, Brian?
Yeah, just at the beginning, Andy, you mentioned that you're getting some stick in South Africa for releasing the 12-year-old into the UK, into Europe. Just expand on that a bit.
Yeah, it's, I actually thought when we did it that our whiskey lovers here would have been as excited about it as I was. But they weren't. They wanted to know, why can't they have it? And it's not right that it's going to UK and this and this. Until I started talking to them, and saying, but listen, guys, you've had 5 releases this year, which UK can't get hold of, which have been exclusive to you. You've got a core range which is exclusive to you. What would happen if the Scots or the Irish didn't ship any whiskey offshore? Guys, but so that was it really. I mean, I would say, 20% were happy about it and 80% unhappy, where I would have hoped it would have been the other way around.
Right. We have seen a few people over there get bottles, though, haven't we?
Sorry, Brian, I missed that.
We have seen a few people over there with bottles of the 12-year-old, though.
Yeah, some of them have actually brought it back in from Master of Malt at great expense, because they're paying them double the duty on it, and the higher price because of the exchange rate. And then we had a brief, and that's how I got my bottle. We had a brief spell before this last lockdown where we kind of opened up our borders. So then the mules could operate and bring a few bottles in. It's not that difficult to get it, Brian, under normal conditions. And, because South Africa and the UK, I mean, there must be 20 flights a week between Joburg and Cape Town and London. And everybody knows somebody who knows somebody who's flying. So, I think the guys were a little bit emotional about it. But yeah, at the end of the day, the decision was taken, and you guys deserve it. I mean, you've been asking for so long, you've been patient for so long. I know Dave, Boutique Dave, he'd love to see the Three Ships 5-year-old over there, and I would too. It's and I mean, people talk about the Japanese who recently had their story about how they're now blending Scottish and Japanese whiskies together. I mean, that's how Three Ships started in 1977. And although all the Three Ships variants are now 100% South African, except for the 5-year-old, which I never will change, because the 5-year-old I developed and launched in 1992 after coming back from spending time on Islay, working at Bowmore with Jim McEwen, and falling in love with the island, the whiskey and the people, and wanting to create something which would remind me of my time spent there, not knowing that, 30 years later, I'd still be in the bloody industry. And it's a highly successful blend, and it still is a South African Scottish combination. So, the Japanese are saying it's something quite new, but it's not really. We've been doing it for years. And the Three Ships 5, the blend of South African and Scottish whiskies, that actually was the world's best blended whiskey at the World Whiskey Awards in 2012.
Do you think it's made it harder for South African people to accept exporting it because it's been so long in coming? Do you think if you'd have been exporting it sort of for a long period now, it wouldn't have come as such a shock then, or?
Yeah, possibly, Soren. I mean, I think South Africa is a very young whiskey market. I mean, the industry itself is only 43 years old. We had our first whiskey live in 2000, the year 2000. So these sort of groups like you've got only started really appearing from the late, 2010 onwards. And it's only since the Masters collection started, 2015, where Three Ships has started to get this kind of I wouldn't say a cult following, but a very loyal, solid following in South Africa, and the image of the brand has gone up. Because remember when Three Ships was launched here, the whiskies drank in this country were predominantly Scotch, and the people were spoiled. I mean, they still are. When it comes into our country, it's a lot cheaper than it is in your country.
Yeah.
So, why drink something South African? And there is kind of, I still say it's still the hardest part of my job at the moment is not necessarily making world-class whiskey, because I've got an exceptional team who's doing that for me while I sit and talk to you guys and used to travel the world. The hardest part of my job is still in South Africa, convincing people that South African whiskey is actually quite good. They still follow the big marketing budget. They still follow the brands which dish out their nightclub with fancy mirrors and lounge suites and everything else, or they take the airport with a a mass marketing campaign for a year. You know, that's the sort of thing we can't compete with. So we do rely on, you know, people trying the liquid, and whiskey being incredibly aspirational, especially for our market in South Africa. You know, it's nice to be seen with some of these, you know, well-known whiskies which you guys have probably moved past, because you like to try new things. You like to try, you know, different whiskies. I've only got to look at our own whiskies in the Distell portfolio, and you know, if you look at this, at Deanston and Tobermory and Bunner to a, you know, possibly a lesser extent, they're not whiskies which 20 years ago were, you know, household names. They're whiskies which are now becoming, you know, very popular and talked about. So I still think in South Africa we've got a lot of work to do with our own market. But yeah, if we'd have maybe been exporting before we got a kind of following in UK, in South Africa, it might have been accepted better by our people. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, listen, they've got to put up with it, Soren. It's the way it's going to be going forward. You know.
Yeah. Yep.
We can't be everywhere for everybody all of the time. Full stop.
Yep. Jens has got a question, if he's there.
Yeah, just how many competitors do you have in South Africa? How many distilleries are there? Whiskey distilleries?
Well, we are the only commercial whiskey distillery on the continent. That's 54 countries. There's nobody else who is making whiskey under the, let's say, the accepted legislation of the Scottish legislation, which is taken as a standard. There's nobody else in Africa selling their whiskey on a commercial basis. By commercial, I mean that product is available in bottle stores in most cities throughout the country. We now have a few craft distillers out here, and we encourage that, because the more people who are making it, obviously the bigger the South African word is to spread, and people are doing it more, except for ourselves. But at this stage, Jens, very, very small. I would say probably 3 or 4 who are now starting to sell a little bit of whiskey from their distillery, but not on a commercial scale yet.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I'm just looking now, and it's showing four other distilleries. So
yeah, you would have Boerplaas there.
Black Horse, Distillery 031, Van Ryan's.
No, that's brandy. That's not whiskey.
Right.
There's lots of other distilleries.
Yeah, he's just bringing it up as whiskey distillery. So yeah, don't know why then.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's lots of gin distilleries, and I'm sure some of those gin people will eventually move on to, you know, to maybe a little bit of whiskey. Gin being a good cash cow in the beginning. But it's I don't think anybody will ever be on the same scale as what we are, Jens. I mean, we started it in the beginning. We've had a incredible backing from the mother company. You know, to put up a setup like we have now, you know, I don't think people would do that. I think, you know, if anybody was interested in South African whiskey, then they would probably come and buy us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Has anybody got any more questions regarding the 12-year-old release from Andy, or?
Only that you need a leak-proof cork. It's evaporating.